This is a little bit of the first time I talked about different business calculations and some terminology. We're going to review a little bit of that, very little, I promise. And then the next time we talk a lot about business plans and how you decide how your business sizes up to other businesses and things like that. And we kind of looked at freestanding EDs. We looked at in some of this, we looked at freestanding EDs. We actually looked at ultrasound, but this is going to be more specific today about a business plan, which I hit toward the end of the talk last time. So I think my objectives for this are to review. We'll review a little bit of stuff about ultrasound. And last time we talked about something called Porter's 5 forces. I'll review that really quickly, but that will make that pertinent to ultrasound today. And then we'll see about how kind of like applying a business model and coming up with a plan that's more applicable. So, you know, I want this to be kind of something where if you Google business plan, you'll get, you can literally download a business plan template from a lot of different sources. And they're all pretty reasonable, but after a while, you'll find that the topics that I'm going to show you that would be like on a table of contents, they start to become kind of familiar. Well, the first talk I gave, we talked about some of these topics. I'm not going to go into depth on these, but we'll mention a little bit about some of these, just about ultrasound, just reminds you a little bit. Remember this term called the net present value, which is a calculation based on cash flow, something called the opportunity cost, so you can look at cash flows over time and discount them in a way where you would consider the interest rate on other alternative investments. That's almost the way you're doing it. Companies really prefer to consider these if you have a positive net present value. Okay, so that's, just remember that as you go through this. And I'm not going to go through all this stuff about how they came up with this, but the formula is like if you are given a cash flow after 100,000 after a year, the discount rate is usually between 8 and 10%. You would use the formula down that last line to come up with the net present value. And when you're doing it over time, it's same kind of thing. And this is what the formula would look like over time if you're doing it. That second line, which is right here, is just what it looks like for 3 years. But then this would be the formula if you were doing it over a lot more years, if that makes sense. Okay, so the other term that is used is called the internal rate of return. And that is really almost using the same formula, but instead of having an R value, now you're solving for R and letting the net present value equal 0. And here, this internal rate of return, whatever percentage that is, if that is greater than this opportunity cost of capital, this R, 8 or 9% or whatever it is, then it's probably a good investment. So that's the rule of thumb for this. Okay, so, and the only reason I'm showing you this is because when we did some numbers for ultrasound, it turned out that it was positive in both of those. We could calculate a payback period as well. I think this is what it looked like, because you can plug these numbers in and there's formulas right on Excel to use to calculate these things. And this is just everything that we had before. We had it over several years. This is not our data. I'm going to show you some of our data tonight. Although my business people and stuff like that were a little leery about me giving you all the specifics of people's salaries, so I'll give you that in a different way, but you'll see what I mean when we get to it. But anyway, you can calculate the cash flow over each year and they come up with this net present value. And down in line 17 and 18 are the net present value and the IRR, and they were both positives, favorable, so it's a favorable. Now this is our data, and this is showing you kind of two graphs. The one above shows our charges, and the one below shows our payments, what we kind of collected. A couple of things on this. You can see that the line has gone up. Interestingly, in 2014, we started using QPath, which really helped our billing quite a bit. And so the rate, if you look at the fraction here, we've gone from about 18% collection to probably in the mid-20s. And that is probably, this is my grandson, by the way. I thought I would just brag and show you guys a picture. Sorry if you're nauseated by this, but anyway, he's going to be a year in January. So that percentage, by the way, is pretty consistent. We'll show one of the one of the categories is kind of a market analysis. And we'll talk a little bit about data from the AAEM, which is the Administrators and Chairs group, where they actually looked at this across the board. So the collection rate is about in the 20s, so it's relatively low. But anyway, last time we talked about these 5 forces, and I'm going to show you what these look like, all these different 5 things, looking at a business, new entrants, in terms of 2 ways to look at this. If you're a new entrant, what does it look like? And if you're in a business, is it difficult or is it easy for competitors to enter? Power of suppliers is really talking probably about the people who have the machines and the vendors. We'll talk a little bit about that. Power of buyers is your patients and your insurance who are paying for this service. And then threat of substitutes is really, are there other things you can do besides ultrasound on the horizon that are going to take ultrasound away? And then rivalry is just, who are your rivals for the service that you're providing? So just to show you a little bit, and we'll try to get through this relatively quick, but new entrants that come in, the problem with them is they can compete for market share. Well, you know, going back, and then high threats of entry, you know, that may, if you have lots of people who can easily enter the market, that may take away your profits. And then there may be new entrants from your organization somehow, or there may be, if you have really low barriers to entry, that means whatever you're doing, it might be a little less profitable. So ultrasound doesn't go along with some of these things a lot because we're so department centric. Probably the main threat is radiology, but I think people who are really into ultrasound kind of feel like theirs is more comprehensive versus bedside ultrasound, and they're really trying to push this concept of physician-interpreted bedside ultrasound. And if you're in the know, like I am not, I guess at the ultrasound meetings they call this ultrasonology. That's the new term they're trying to use. But anyway, besides radiology, I don't know that there's a lot of risk that other people are going to be coming into the ED using this modality. So, and the only other entrant into the medical center may be other departments, but most of the time EM is training those people. In terms of barriers to entry, these are some things that are classic things. You know, if a company has really large scale, it's hard for me to come up with a cola and compete with Coke or Pepsi. But I'm not sure that we're not really dependent on those kind of numbers. So for us, these things don't matter near as much. Network effect really means if Coke is really tied into the ingredients, the distribution ways, things like that, well, if I'm trying to break in, I may have a really hard time doing that. So that could be a barrier. But I don't think we have a problem with where our patients go or anything like that. And we'll talk about switching costs as well. But one big benefit that we have, and I'll look forward to hearing what other people say about this, is in most cases, ultrasound machines are paid for by the medical center. They theoretically do this with technical costs that they collect, which I think this is a black box that I've yet to break into, nor has anybody in our ultrasound. So if people know these things, I'd love to hear it. But right now, we don't know what those are, but that's how they're able to pay for that stuff. These are just some other things about, again, we don't really have capital requirements where you need a lot of resources to compete. Well, the main resource for ultrasound, I think, is really training. Equipment isn't the biggest thing. So anyway, there's some incumbency advantages as well. So if somebody's been doing this a long time, well, we don't really have that. We're just training people, and it's almost a standard of care. So that's not an issue for us. And there's really not much of an income. The one thing, the government policy, the only reason I bring this up is because every medical center seems to have a different credentialing process. And this can be a little limiting in terms of what they require for your initial credentialing and what they require for maintenance. So this it may be a little variable and may be a little difficult. And also insurance companies may have a role in this because they may decide that you have to be credentialed, and their credentialing process may be different as well. So anyway, this is just getting to suppliers. In this picture, you see the old huge ultrasound, and you see this kind of newer, smaller version that I think we're more accustomed to seeing these days. And that's something like this at the bedside. So probably using more of these. And in some cases, this company called Butterfly is now touting this another type of ultrasound that you basically look at on your cell phone. Anybody using these? I don't know if anybody's using these at all. Are they? We are not using them, but some people may be.
We just, this is Ryan, we just purchased 3 of them for our ultrasound fellows as kind of a trial at about $2,000 a piece. So I don't know how much they're going to add. I think it's more of a novelty, but we'll see. Maybe it's the future.
Yeah, that'll be fascinating. I'd be really curious to see how that works out. So suppliers, you know, this equipment is kind of the comprehensive parts of these that radiology uses and the ones that are at the bedside. They're really advanced quite a bit. So there are the ones that we use are much more portable. They're much easier to use and they're cheaper. And there's a lot of companies. So there's Sonosite, Philips, Butterfly, all these different companies. And this is just reiterating exactly what you said. Those devices cost $2,000, which is a lot cheaper than some of these bigger ones that could be $30,000 to $70,000. And we all know the probes are pretty expensive. So the beauty of that is, anybody want to weigh in, or is anybody in a situation where your department or group pays for this equipment? Anybody want to weigh in? So I'm assuming by your silence that pretty much your department or individuals doesn't pay for it. It's really purchased by the hospital.
Ours is paid by the hospital, yeah.
Okay.
Hospital for us as well.
We'll get to the switching costs in a while, but this is one thing that also can play a role. If you're looking at buyers, or which patients and insurers is what I kind of look at this. And if you have other ways that you look at this in terms of these 5 forces, let me know. But insurers and patients, they can force down the prices. And they can also increase requirements for documentation, quality. Interestingly, I guess a lot of these vendors now are developing their own software that they're kind of, you know, bundling with their equipment that they're selling. Although they're not restrictive enough that they're saying, well, you can't even use QPath. But that may be something that is going to be a good thing, a bad thing, I'm not sure. But more and more vendors are starting to do that, I guess. But I think the products are relatively standard. So I think the cost to switch from different suppliers is relatively low. So substitutes would be, is there something else that we can use? Well, all the alternatives are slower, usually pricier, and they may even have some side effects. So I think there's just too many disadvantages at this point. And alternatives, you know, they have price distance and they're usually more expensive as well. So not a great situation for that. Rivalry, if you view mainly you know, radiology as the rival, as long as they're doing different things, I got a feeling that that's not even a big issue at this point. And as ultrasound becomes a standard of care, it's going to be even more of this. So another way to look at these 5 forces is to consider them and say, is this force low, high, moderate? How does it stack up? So I made this diagram now pertinent to these 3 areas. And in my view, the threat of new entrants is relatively small. Pretty easy to get into this. And even though internal medicine, surgery, ICUs, they're now entering into bedside ultrasound, I think EM is doing most of the training and teaching of these groups. At least that's what happens in my place. And so they're still way behind us, and I don't think they'll ever compete directly with us. I can't imagine them coming down to scan somebody with their own scanner or anything like that while, you know, after they've been admitted, you know, and use their scans instead of ours. I don't know of cases where these are done in other, like, urgent care settings. I know they're done in freestanding EDs, but not other settings. And again, I think the comprehensive radiology argument kind of lends a credibility to doing it at the bedside more. If you look at bargaining power of suppliers, I think that's pretty low because there are so many vendors and there's so many ways, to get other people. They are purchased by the hospital as well, so they really don't. If we're going to have a business of doctors who are billing for this, I'm not sure they hurt us that much. Threaded substitutes, we already kind of talked about that. And then we also talked about bargaining power of buyers, how insurers can force down prices or require more. And people aren't going to switch to other EDs because of ultrasound. They're not going to say, well, hey, all these guys are better with ultrasound, I'm going to go there. That's not going to happen. And this is just talking about rivalry and radiology being that. So this is kind of summarizing what we just spoke about. This is in Hawaii. Anybody ever been here? Mount Haleakala, I think?
No, I haven't been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You haven't, Fiona. You're pretty close to it, aren't you? You're closer than a lot of us.
Most amazing sunrise I think I've ever seen.
Yeah. Well, we did it the lazy way. We went for the sunset over the clouds. I get up like at 3 in the morning or something to see that sunrise. But you're right. I heard it is really amazing. So now we're going to talk about development. We mentioned this before about it's important to have a competitive advantage. I think there's a lot of reasons to have this in something that is bringing in revenue like this. It can really help you see where your financial support is coming from and what you want to do with it. I think administrators look at balance sheets and financial spreadsheets across the whole department a lot in the medical center. I don't think they enough subdivided into a place like this. Like I'm on the finance committee at our place, and once a month we meet and we go over all the spreadsheets for the department as a whole. Then we look at like our after hours clinics that we run. We look at our main site, our east site, we divide them up. But probably this ought to be divided up too, and it's not really a separate entity, although I think it should be. So it kind of helps you with financial support, probably helps you prioritize. You'll see that when we talk more about these categories. And it maybe gives you more control over what's happening with the business, and probably even helps you with management of people and operations and things like that. So it can probably help you with strategies for growth as well and just help you with decisions. Maybe one of the best examples of this, if you ever get a chance, I would look at the book called Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh. And that's the kind of was Zappos, the shoe company. It's a really interesting read. I actually hated the guy the first 3 chapters because he seemed like, well, did you read it, Fiona? Because growing up, he like took advantage of everybody. His own parents. Well, he was like an Asian American, and he was talking about how all Asian Americans had to be either a PhD or a doctor, and basically they had to play 2 musical instruments. So he kind of stuck. He had some really good recording equipment, and he would record himself playing the piano, and he was supposed to be playing for an hour. Instead, he would just play the recorder to fool his parents. But he did a lot of stuff like that. But I think what he really did that was interesting is he really realized that he had to get more business savvy. He sold some kind of software company, and then he started Zappos, and he came up with kind of a business plan and really came up with like core values, and the whole group at the time participated. They came up with these, and they sort of lived by them. So if they came up with a decision, they said, well, how does that fit in with our plan, with our core values? And that was maybe the fascinating part of the book. I mean, every decision they made that was big, should we open up a warehouse here? Should we move here? They looked at that. So I thought that was, and I think a business plan can give you that as well. So I kind of boiled this down to maybe 10 things. But again, if you start looking at this material, you'll see some of these templates that have even more than 10 things. I mean, there's a lot of different things you could put in business plans. But for simplicity and to make this a little easier, I kind of boiled it down to about 10 different things. So cover page is a gimme with the name and maybe at least the important players of the business. Table of contents is going to guide you for the topics. Pretty easy. This kind of like high view of your company, what problem you're solving and where the company's going and what they're offering. A shortened version of that is a big key. They all have these organizational vision, mission, core values, and goals, something like that. If you want to get the best article about this, I think it's the one by Porter in Harvard Business Review. And that one really has some really interesting approaches to coming up with like a vision and mission and stuff like that. Needless to say, our director of ultrasound didn't really have much of a mission statement, which isn't surprising. A lot of people don't do this. We actually even published a paper about in the Western Journal of Medicine about with some educators looking at our own personal vision and mission statements not that long ago. So that's out there as well. And I think it references the article by Porter. So, but that's part of it. Some background about where ultrasound is common. I'll show you that for our place. What I'm going to do is show you how these, how these relate to our ultrasound mission here. And then some kind of thing about your team and the team members and maybe about what their roles are. Some sort of market analysis, what's happening out there. This is currently the weakest part of my presentation because I think you can get pretty sophisticated with market analysis and show nice graphs, things like that. First of all, I don't think that kind of data exists very well, but the more people can just look at some images in either a pie chart or other kind of charts, that really is help here. Operations plan, who does what and when kind of thing. And then we'll talk about financials, and I'll be curious to see if people know much about their own systems, but I think you'll find the way that we fund it and what we do with ours is fairly unique. So, so right now we get patient care revenue, which I showed. The medical center gives us some dollars to train people in other departments, believe it or not. And our College of Medicine also pays us because we have a whole student curriculum as well. And we're actually involved in almost all the years of the College of Medicine here. And there's some other investors. We talked about these before with other companies. Remember, we talked about angel investors and venture capitalists. People, I think some of the larger groups out there are using some of these types of investors. Anybody know what FFF means? This is like your original startup. You get FFF to help you. Anybody ever heard that term? It's called Friends, Family, and Fools. Yeah, you need some FFF to start with. So anyway, keep that in mind.
Fibbers.
What's that, Keel?
Foes, fakers, and fibbers.
That's a good one too. And then there's going to be something about the future and the forecast, and always the nice thing about a SWOT analysis, it lets you look at your whole plan each year and see where you are and kind of compare where you are. So you don't want to make it a novel, but some of these things are pretty long. Okay, so I will make a distinction between a business plan and a proposal. And so a proposal might be a brand new thing and there's an ask involved. You're asking for something. It's a little different than a plan that helps you kind of like strategize about the direction you're headed. And I'm speaking more to that, but the business plan can also be used as a proposal. The only problem is RFP is really, or an RFP or a proposal is really asking, it has an ask with it. So how can somebody help me or fund me or whatever? Ultrasound, if you're going to do that and use your plan as a proposal, the biggest thing biggest key that you have to put in there that probably isn't as well in this plan the way it is articulated is you have to have something to show the benefits of what you're going to do, what your company, what your product, your startup, whatever. And the more it is measurable and the more it gets to what's important in this climate, the more your CMO, your CEO, your administrative people are going to be interested. So this is what ultrasound does, right? There's value at the bedside. We all know this. I mean, we can do an ultrasound and demonstrate an IUP a lot quicker than sending the patient out of the department. Patient satisfaction is probably higher because you can give them a diagnosis, let them see the ultrasound, and get people throughput better. Maybe safety is better, particularly with central lines and things like that. And there's revenue for docs and the hospital. So there's some positives here. And there's probably even savings compared to the substitutes, and it's also maybe safer as well. Maybe just a better quality of care. Now, if you look at what CEOs and CMOs want to hear, they really want a shorter length of stay. They really want you to show them how patient satisfaction, because a lot of these things are directly related to revenue. So they want to know more about the revenue, the quality, and things like that. So if you're gonna, this is an ask for you. you don't currently have a well-funded program, then you'll have to really demonstrate how you're doing this. Okay, and some of these are related. Like if your patient satisfaction can be higher because of this, or your length of stay is shorter, you can easily relate that to more patient scenarios in your ED. You can relate it to more reimbursement by value-based purchasing because of patient satisfaction. There's a lot of different things that you can relate these things to that are pretty well. So the cover page for us is about the division of ultrasound. These are 8 people who are in our ultrasound division right now with variable amounts of protected time. Dave Boehner is kind of our director. He's a full professor. He actually developed our program. Craig Bolger was probably the second in command. Almost everybody else has done fellowship training. But those are the 2 starters of the whole thing. And I'll show you how their support is a little bit different and what we do to kind of let them at least have time to do ultrasound. This is what your table of contents would look like given the categories we already mentioned. You'd have a page number on the right, and there's your topic areas. The executive summary of our thing, it usually is several paragraphs. I'm just showing you some bullet points of what ours kind of looks like. Let me go back. This is just showing you that it really is helping with clinical care of our patients. We have OSU Main and OSU East, our 2 main sites. All our docs are credentialed. All our scans get quality assurance reviews the next day. And QPath is right now our main software for documentation. We purchased it and aren't really, I think we purchased it so early on that we're not even, I think, doing a big maintenance fee. Although now I think to purchase the software, you have to pay a maintenance fee yearly as well. We are made it so OSU is the center of ultrasound education. So our faculty are credentialed. They help train the residents and fellows. And then we have a pretty active fellowship program. We've had as many as 3 fellows, but now it's turned into a match. So we're to the point where we only matched 1 because we only wanted 1 this year, but we may increase that. And then we have training courses throughout medical school and throughout our residencies. Our division has become a division in the last couple of years, but they've also been really a big leader in terms of research as well. And there's strategy for growth, and growth even outside of EM as well. So this is what our department vision, we just restructured and came up with this to transform emergency medicine through innovation. But our mission statement for ultrasound is creating a paradigm for medical ultrasound education through research and evidence-based clinical care. So this is pretty new, and I really had to hammer my director to his first attempt, by the way, just to show you. I think people don't really know what mission and vision statement. They don't know a lot about it. So when I asked Dave to come up with one, he gave me like a 1-page document. His email. I sent an email back and said, Dave, it's supposed to be 1 sentence. So anyway, so he came up with this, and so anyway, but anyway, you could talk a long time about coming up with those statements, but that's what he came. Our background here, and let me pause there. Any questions about any of that so far?
No, this is really cool and very helpful.
Yeah, I think it really, really helps a division like that. Maybe each division should have something like this because they are a business model.
Yeah.
But I think for ultrasound, it makes a lot of sense. So our ultrasound here at OSU, we started like in the 80s and 90s. This not at OSU, but devices began to improve. We all know this history, I think, to some extent. Units became smaller, faster, more portable. During the late 90s, we started using this, and it started to be published about using it for fast scans and kind of largely replaced DPLs to some extent. Dr. Boehner, our current director, now is a full professor, but he graduated in 98. You know, he was a little bit of a quirky guy, but he had a huge love and passion for ultrasound. These are where the guidelines stand from ACEP, 2001. They've been revised a couple of times. And then by 2005, we started using this clinically and actually started billing for it. Weren't very successful because we were doing a lot of it by hand, but we started it. And then 2014, we started using QPath, and we operationalized that. Now, in this day right now, in our main department, we have 7 ultrasound machines. Dr. Boehner directs ultrasound education for emergency medicine for the College of Medicine. He's busy helping train trainers in the MICU, the SICU, Children's Hospital. So they have a lot of scope in there. In fact, so much that at times we wonder, should we cut Dave back in some of the stuff that he's doing, because he's probably not reimbursed by all these people who are doing it, or who he's helping, which is something that you have to kind of consider as well. And we'll get into some of the limitations of this as well, but it just shows you it's a pretty well-founded program. Interesting thing about it is, we had an abdominal ultrasound guy like 8 years ago who was really anti-emergency medicine. You know how you have these guys that just want to make a big stand? Well, that guy's gone. There was a cardiologist who was in charge of the echo lab and just didn't see how EM could ever look at a heart. And he's been demoted already. So, and meanwhile, Dave, three or 4 years ago, gets Professor of the Year. So, we're well beyond any kind of skirmishes, which is kind of nice. And I think that's a sweet spot that it's nice to see departments get there. This is the part I was telling you about. I think if you had graphs, this would be helpful. But I think ultrasound is becoming, it might be nice to show, if you were using this as a business plan, that it is a standard of care, and maybe how much penetration there is with ultrasound. The collection rate is probably improved, although it's still relatively low, but probably the collection rate in emergency medicine is kind of low anyway. Most insurers are paying something, but the rates are variable among these companies. And then QPath has really helped, but I think these software programs to help bill are really changing a lot. And like I said, vendors are even bundling their own billing packages. So I think it's, for the near future, it's definitely here to stay. People are getting a little more success. Some of these software packages clearly help with billing. Dave's working on a paper right now, I think, kind of talking more about billing and stuff like that. So that'll be coming out before long. The operations plan, I mean, we do, not only do we have ultrasound machines that we use for our patients, but Dave has an 8-hour-a-day team that scans 5 days a week. So at a given time, if you're really busy, you can just page the ultrasound pager and they'll come down and do the scan and go over it with you. And that team has one ultrasound attending who's assigned to do this every day. And usually there's a variety of learners, residents, fellows, and students. And then they also round in the morning on QPath. They go over that in the morning, usually every day, to look at the ultrasounds from the previous day. So, my biggest struggle as an attending is the resident will document on QPath and put the images on there, and then we'll put the results of the scan, and I have to countersign the QPath after that's all done. Well, sometimes residents don't finish till later, so I'm constantly getting these reminders, sign your QPath charts. You have to go in there and sign them. I mean, it's not difficult, but those are like, so I get on a bad person list because I'm not up to date with that. So, but a QPath lets you at least get a nice list of who needs to sign those, and we try to help with our billing lag by getting all that stuff done. We have a resident curriculum that involves them doing something every year. College of Medicine has a curriculum in the 3rd and 4th year rotations, and we have an advanced topics in emergency medicine that part of the curriculum. And then Dave has a couple of different, he has a longitudinal study, so 4th years can spend the whole 4th year being involved in ultrasound. They go to some meetings, they do some scanning, they do different tasks, or there's an ultrasound immersion that's like a 1-month course. Oh, shoot. There, sorry about that. And then he's been doing more and more with outside departments. I got to tell you that, we'll talk about that in a while. I think that's a little bit of a limitation, and I'll tell you why as we get to it. Their research has been phenomenal. In fact, today I walked into Dave's office. He's in there counseling a student who's doing a research project. So what's a project? He always introduces me to everybody. It's a student in the 2nd or 3rd year who says, well, what we're trying to do is look at our last 150 publications and see how many of them involve students. I mean, there's so many things to publish and do, and ultrasound, it's just really a neat area to get involved with research. Anybody else out there doing much research in the audience at all on ultrasound?
Not me.
Go ahead.
I'm not.
Yeah, we do very little case reports, maybe, but that's about it. Maybe some fun images and things like that get published, but that's about it.
Well, we're fortunate because we have a master's in education who helps us a lot with educational research, and a lot of this fits under that. So they have a pretty robust structured research group now that they do a lot of stuff. Dave's, and we have another guy, we have other people in our department who are NH funded, and Dave out publishes them. So, you know, he's been awarded a couple of times in the last 4 years for having the most publications in the department. So I keep telling him, just put my name on those. We get Dave? No, I don't say that. But this is a little bit of financial support. So the first, number one is Dave. I guess I'm trying to hide their names, even though you can look a couple slides before that. And they wouldn't let me put the financial amount that each person gets in. My original version, I had that. But instead, I kind of summarized the total support. And that's a little misleading, and we'll tell you why in a second. So what I did put down there is our cost of reducing somebody's time, which is kind of what they turn the money that comes into them into, but our cost for reducing a shift burden, I think our full-time, nothing but clinical people are like 1672 hours a year. And our time for, it's like 16, 17 shifts right in there. So, but our time for reducing, our dollar amount, the cost is somewhere between 21 to 24 or 5,000, depending on your rank. It costs more to replace the shift or to get the shift buy down if you're a professor like Dave is, versus some of these people are kind of like pretty new junior faculty. So you can take that number where it shows total shifts. So that really means that that Dave, well, the number one person is the director. He gets like almost 7 shifts of support, and 4 of those are because he's a core faculty member. We'll talk about that in a second. And about 3 of those are for other roles, everything from medical director to let me get rid of this one. To medical director to the dollars that come in from ultrasound. So
I'm sorry. Can you stop just a second? Is anybody else having trouble seeing Dan's slides?
Can you see this slide?
I can't see the slides.
No, slides.
Yeah, something got clicked off, so
I don't see the slides for that one.
I tried rebooting the program and that didn't do it. I'm still back to the blank screen that just says cord.
Oh, that's
yeah, mine did that too.
I X'd out of that. I didn't know I had to do anything else. Let me see if I can get it back somehow. I think Deanna's still there, isn't she?
Yes, I'm here, and I still have you as the presenter. So go up to the share your screen button.
Okay. Okay, I'm looking here.
Do you see the green microphone? And then next to that, there's a computer screen.
Yep, I got it on there, and I'll try to click on it. Let's see what happens.
There, we see your computer screen now.
I have no idea what picture that is, though.
No, that's mine. I'm just testing it out. And I do it, so you must have clicked something off wrong.
All right, let me see.
So,
well, let me
just get off of mine. I'm going to make you a presenter again.
All right. Let me try this again. I'll put share on there, and we'll see what happens. Can you see that?
There you go.
Yes.
Yay!
How many slides was that?
I'm not sure.
All right, well,
Just a couple.
Just a couple, good. I'm just going to scroll through these. This is the other stuff that we did.
Can you post these slides without the family pictures?
Oh yeah, we can take all the other stuff out. Sure. There's only one family picture, but we can take the other ones out too.
Okay.
Okay, no problem. Sorry about that. Do you want to get the humor slides out too?
That's your call. The humor's fine.
Here. I think we were down to here where we showed what the topics were and talked about the executive summary, and then we, I think, got into operations plan. We did.
Yeah,
we were right here, the finances. Everybody have this?
So this is the first time we're seeing that.
Okay, all right. Let me go. Is it showing the slides on the side for you guys too? I'm trying to like when I look at mine, it's
showing the slides on the side.
It is showing that too. I don't know why I can't click on. Oh, wait a minute. I'm surprised I can't click on slideshow and bring that up from the current slide, but I don't know. I don't mind proceeding with this if that's okay with you guys. Is that all right?
Yeah, that sounds fine.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So what I was showing you before is if I had dollar amounts connected to these shifts where it says dollar amounts, it would all add up to $885,000 that is either coming in, the next slide will clarify this a little bit, or it's being paid out to people who are doing ultrasound to reduce their shift burden. And there's two ways that they get dollars. One is because 4 of them are core faculty. So our standard reduction for somebody who's core faculty is 4 shifts, which is, probably $80,000 to $100,000 depending on their rank. And then ultrasound shifts are the dollar amount that they get from the ultrasound income that are spread between these people. And we do have a couple of core faculty that are 7 and 8 down there that I'm pointing out. They only have 1 shift that they do ultrasound on, so they have less requirements and stuff like that. Okay. Now, let's go to the next slide, and it might become a little bit more clear. Hopefully, it can go. Yeah, there. This might be a little bit better way to conceptualize this. So our professional fees I showed you, and this year were about $135,000 that we've collected. We probably billed 4 times as much, but we end up collecting this much. The CMO of the medical center pays our ultrasound team about $60,000 to teach in other departments and to be the medical director. So he pays that much. And then our College of Medicine support is about $86,000. I think that 86 is about a 0.2 FTE, but that's the dollar amount that we have to work with that are specific to the division of ultrasound. And we mentioned about core faculty shifts. So that $405,000, that's because now also realize that if those people are core faculty, what we tried to do is we have core faculty that with 4 shifts reduced for core faculty, we know all the things they're required to do. We know how many conferences they go to. It's all in a big spreadsheet. We know how many professor rounds they have to do, which means basically observe in the department and give residents feedback. We know research. We know what they do with students. We know all that for that 4 shifts a month that they get. But what we did is we essentially said, well, our ultrasound folks are going to be doing a lot of teaching in the GME world of residents, so we'll trade some of those activities out so they can do this. So they don't, all that dollar doesn't go to nothing but ultrasound. It's kind of like core faculty dollars, but it kind of supports them to get reduced time. So it's really kind of a split between core faculty and some of the ultrasound teaching they do of residents. Okay, and then meanwhile, this 13.1 is kind of like out of that 261 above, they're paying for people to get some reduced time in that domain as well. Okay, I could have done this as a spreadsheet. There is a spreadsheet that had a lot of this stuff on it, but they were a little reluctant to let me show you people's salaries. I don't think it's a big deal, but you can probably kind of figure out anyway. But does this all make sense to you? I'd like to get some feedback about if people are doing anything that's similar to this, or with their core faculty, ultrasound shifts, if they're able to turn around and use this or not. One frustration that we've had is, and I don't know that this is that unreasonable, because as long as the hospital and the medical center continue to supply equipment and pay for that and let us do what we need to do, I'm almost okay with this. But I know a lot of the ultrasound people like Dave is really thinking, I would really like to see what it looks like, those technical fees coming into the hospital and how big those are, and because usually those are a lot more than the physician fees. But anyway, I'm going to stop there and just, these last 2 slides were kind of the big part of the presentation that I thought might generate some discussion.
I have a question for you. Could you go over again the $405,000 for the faculty shifts? Is that the money coming from the department or from the hospital to support the core faculty to have the protected time?
That's a great question. We do get dollars that are teaching dollars from the College of Medicine each year and from the medical center. those dollars go for a lot of things. They're supposed to go to help fund the core faculty members. They're supposed to go to help fund shift reductions we have for residency directors and leaders and vice chairs of education like me. But there's not enough to really adequately fund it. I mean, if we had to try to get, and who knows how much longer this requirement will be in effect, but if we're supposed to work 1248 or 1344, or however you define that number, and it's a reduction from some larger number that's a full-time person, we probably don't get enough money. So we are using clinical revenue for those reductions too. But we were pretty generous by saying, if you're a full-time core faculty, then you have 4 shifts a month that are protected. And I think that was pretty generous, but that's helped our faculty members do a lot of interesting things. So I think we're hoping that we can stay by that, although I never know when that might change. So if you look at this slide before, you can see that people who are numbers 1 through 4 are full-time core faculty have a full reduction of that criteria. But their roles that they would normally have as core faculty have been constricted because of the amount of ultrasound education they do for the residents. Does that make sense? So you're right, it does come from a lot of buckets. It comes from the College of Medicine, and actually interestingly, the College of Medicine right now, that bucket's actually bigger than the bucket from the GMV department. So everybody still able to hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
So-
and what you're doing is wise, though, with the core faculty. Those are already sunk costs, and it's one of the milestones, and you're not going to let your residents, and it's pretty easy from your chair perspective or your CFO to say, can't have these residents who are saving us bundles of money in terms of patient care over things like, mid-level providers. I got to train them in ultrasound. It's one of the milestones. So it's already, we have to have it. So yeah, we'll sync some of those 4 core faculty into the GME side core faculty piece, which hides some of their costs associated with teaching shifts as just an expectation, which is great. And I think the numbers, the 2 things that I would add to your model a little bit and thinking about it for other people is one thing which is beyond the scope of a business plan here, but not always considered is mergers and the synergies associated with a merger. And for us, we very much approached it, 10 years ago in our department as a merger with radiology. And since we're all in one big pot of money, what kind of savings is the Department of Radiology going to see by us buying more ultrasound machines? And the reason why we've got 10 ultrasound machines in our department is because our chair of radiology says, buy more damn ultrasound machines for the entire hospital, because that's one fewer tech that I have to have on overnight, which that labor cost is insane. And now instead I can keep 1 tech on at night round the clock staying busy, but we've reduced the amount of work. And now we can have our echo sonographer for our 800-bed hospital take call from home because of how well our cardiology fellows and our ED and our critical care folks have been doing in point-of-care ultrasound. So you look at those synergies, and then you've got to dig into those facility side charges for the machine and the professional or the facility side billing pieces of those, because that's the real cost. And for us in our department, we use it as capital cost to purchase the machines, but it is a committee now that is led by our ED in terms of point of care ultrasound machines for the entire institution, and I think we're now at 50 some odd machines. But they review the service lines for them. What their current function is for each floor and units, as well as their depreciation and replacement costs. And it's not a trivial thing, but the facility side charges is what we have been able to convince obviously our folks in billing for QPath purchasing, and that's simply allowed us to have 1/2 of an FTE for one of our non-core faculty doing the QA, QI, and following up on some of the billing. So that money does exist, and but I would just say throw in some synergies for merging with your department rather than fighting your radiology department and stealing their business.
Yeah.
For us, it was pretty easy. It's all one big pot of money, and we're doing the ultrasound anyway, so this is revenue nobody's collecting.
Right. Yeah. That's really a great point. Maybe those facility charges could be argued to fund some other positions. So that's really just to finish up, because I know it's getting close to 7. The future and forecast part of a business plan just talks about what's going to happen down the road. We're still growing a lot. In fact, one business plan that we looked at a while back was just educating other departments so they're really up to speed on ultrasound as well, and to have a business of doing that. A SWOT analysis for this, I mean, the strengths, we have a lot of strengths with now we're billing, things like that. Those are all big. I think some attendings are quite variable in terms of skills. So right now we've required all attendings to attend a training session each year. So they can, hopefully more, but those are all options each month for them. Here's one thing that Dave told me, and I don't know if you guys have heard this, but I've heard that there's a move afoot to make ultrasound be an extension of the physical exam to the point of excluding it from being a procedure. That would be a big problem with all the billing that we're doing. So I'm hoping that doesn't come in. That may be more of a threat, I guess. But it is difficult to. My other big weakness, I think, that's difficult as the vice chair when I'm trying to fight these battles with Dave and get more money from the CMO and things like that. He's an MBA guy, and he always wants to know, well, how much time is it going to take? What time? Give me a time element. Give me dollars and cents. And I have trouble getting from the ultrasound world what is the time and energy investment and the value that's equated with training other trainers to really make this where it needs to go. You know what I mean? That needs to be looked into more. So, so those are all, and I have my threats down there as well. So anyway, I'm going to stop there and just see if anybody else has any comments or questions. Business plans are important. Just want to emphasize that, and so I'll see if people have any questions.
Hey Dan, can you go back to your finance slides? I guess slides 45 and 46. So you've got 885, 480 down at the bottom of that, and then you go to the next slide. And I appreciate this isn't in a spreadsheet. Go to 46 right now.
40. Where I got what?
The very next slide.
Oh, the very next slide. Yeah.
Yeah. So was this part of your plan when you approach the power, the C-suites? Was this part of a spreadsheet that you've extrapolated out these numbers from, or is this just something you've put together as the program has evolved?
Yeah, we did not use this data to make an argument to get more funding. That number, that 60,000 from the medical center, and also College of Medicine support, those numbers started off smaller, 5-6 years ago, and we just making the argument that the scope is so much larger and what we're doing with other departments, they've increased those for us.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I was just, I guess when you first presented this, I thought this was perhaps a proposal, or if it was a proposal, and then first off, I think the way you've done your faculty makes tons of sense, and but if anybody is putting together a plan and you've got a cost analysis on one slide or on an Excel line, and then on the very next line is the exact amount that you need to cover that, which I think is, if I'm doing my math correctly, Dan, you correct me if I'm wrong, those numbers are super close, if not identical. Am I reading that right?
You mean if you add those three lines, they come up to 885. Is that what you mean? Yeah.
So this is just an advising thing. If you're putting together a plan. I'll tell you that, like, sitting with some of the finance guys that you guys have heard from already, their eyebrow goes up immediately whenever two lines, this is how much we can make and this is how much it's going to cost, and they're exactly equal. That always gets people's suspicions up. There should be some variance. In our world, I think I'm just got out of an acquisition meeting earlier, and we had a plan that actually was coming out of negative, but overall, just like ultrasound, it has unmeasurable benefits. And it's obviously a move of the future. This plan, we voted for a positive recommendation on it because it made sense. The numbers didn't add up, though, and that's cool. Sometimes you can get away with it. Of course, it's always better when your revenue side is going to be bigger. But if you're putting together a proposal, having numbers that exactly add up make people nervous. And it was just an observation as I was looking at those bolded numbers that you had below it. And I think anytime we're doing a proposal, it very rarely comes out equally. It's always better to be on the plus side.
That total up there, that's 261, that's sort of what that pot is kind of used to give those reduced shifts that add up to 13.1.
Right,
so
right. Okay, I get it.
That total, which is like the revenue side, and then if we're reducing people's shifts, that would be a little bit of the cost. I probably could have done a better job in showing the differences there. That would be a little bit of the department cost or the cost of the ultrasound division. So that you can tell that there's obviously 261 minus 218. There's a little bit left over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing, maybe to your point, Keel, making this better and more detailed, if it was on a spreadsheet, you could have probably shown that 405,000 and what percent of their time goes to GME ultrasound and other, goes to ultrasound activities within GME versus all the other things. There's probably a way you can break that down from a percentage standpoint.
Right, right. Yeah, I appreciate how you've made this a little bit more simple. That's excellent. When you had a slide, it was way back. I want to ask you to look for it. When you were saying what CMOs and CEOs are looking for, and you don't have to go back. I was just thinking about your plan anatomy as a whole. Is this a structure that you're seeing meet with success at the executive level? Is that what the 10 different points that you have in your plan? When you flesh all of those out, is that what they're asking for?
Well, what I was trying to do, and I asked my administrative people, if this were presented as a plan to get more dollars, or I'm starting this anew, what in their opinion are the things that administrative people look at and say, we'll pay for that. I mean, if you just say, hey, we think we can give better care with an ultrasound machine, please invest this much money, and here's our startup costs and everything else, and you do that, I don't know. I mean, you can maybe answer the question too, Keel. Do you think that's as effective as being able to show the dollars and being able to show potential revenue, or maybe less incidents in terms of safety, or something that they can look at and say, this is measurable, this will help us? And there might be things like that would just help reputation. They don't have to be revenue generators, but maybe there's things like that are a little bit more intangible.
Yeah, and I thank you. I think you're spot on that. In bold speak, this is what anybody that's looking after the finances of an institution, what they're going to hear or want to hear. But I think this is one of those places where it's really critical to know your audience. In the general structure of the plan, you've got to have, really the weight's going to come on the number end for certain audience members, the CFO, possibly your CEO. The CMO may be much more interested, though, in how you describe whatever project you're shooting for. In ultrasound, you've already made all the arguments about why this is a great thing, why it has to be part of practice and training. I was thinking about this. My first business plan here turned into it was a 30-something page tome, and I spoke to the division chief executive that I was making a proposal to, and I had a meeting with him. I put it on his desk. I'd already emailed it, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm not having it. Come back in 2 days, and I need 3 pages, and the last one needs to be money." I was like, "Wait, 30 pages or 30 whatever pages, back down to 3." He's like, "Yep, just give me the nut meats." He was kind enough to do me a solid and actually give me a second audience with him. That turned out pretty well. But the point here is when you're coming up with a business plan, do it for you and your team and your department, as Dan has said, so that everybody knows what is the horizon, what is your mission. And then when you're going to be presenting it to somebody, get some background information about what's been successful before, maybe other examples of plans in your institution, or if you're going external to that with some other business, what has worked for other people with that audience, and then be able to carve it up however you need to. That was really my point. There can be way too much, and then that's always better than too little, except for some people.
I think that is really a good point, especially being familiar with what other successful plans have been proposed and things like that. I think that's a great idea.
I'm curious, sometimes you don't know who's had a successful bid to the CMO or the CEO. Do you have how would you kind of vet that, or how would you sort of figure that out?
Well, one way you can do it is just to discuss it with the chair.
Okay.
And I mean, with other chairs even, and your chair they have all kinds of chair meetings that they have, that they may know some different things that those different places have done. I mean, we now have radiologists. I mean, we have a whole division of emergency radiology. So my guess is that there was some cost involved in doing that, having people on call that many hours in the hospital and things like that, present in the ED. But they did it, and so, that had to be a proposal to somebody. But there's probably a lot of examples like that. If it's not that, it may be equipment, it may be stuff in the OR, maybe your trauma surgeons are using some different things, ECMO machines, I don't know. I'm sure there's things out there that people have proposed that you can probably get your hands on.
Cool.
I don't know if you go to the CMO. I guess the CMO might be another possibility. And just say, hey, can you give me an example of something? I mean, over the years, we've had proposals about after-hours clinics. We've had proposals about observation, our observation unit, things like that we've done as well. But good question.
I think in our shop, it's pretty easy. Somebody's bragging about it. They're the easy spot. I think Dan's advice about going to the chair, who usually has an ear in multiple meetings and probably has been present when some other department has had something that moved smoothly through finance or capital or whatever your committee is that you're going to be negotiating with. For me, we actually have this kind of running wall newsletter thing that comes across our screens all the time. I used to think, oh, I'm really sick of these, exquisite pictures and then some like little byline underneath it. And then I started reading some of them, and I started getting more and more information about what was really happening. It wasn't just like, wow moments of different staff members. It's actually, our palliative care group just got another acquisition of some care center. Or surgery has moved into some new service line, and they acquired a specialist or some capital piece of equipment that needed to be that was felt to be needed by the division. And from that, I would see who were the stakeholders and actually asking around. those are just a few of the ways that I think I would try to get a better handle on that, Fiona.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Well, that's about all I have. I really appreciate everybody this late in the month and things like that. Good to talk to everybody. So appreciate people staying engaged and involved.